There's something you need to understand about the man who walks alone, the man who seems to move through the world on a different frequency than everyone else. People look at him and make assumptions. They think he's lonely. They think he's bitter. They think he's running from something, or that something is broken inside him that prevents him from connecting the way normal people do. But what if I told you that these assumptions reveal more about the people making them than about the man himself? What if the truth is something far more profound, something that Alfred Adler understood in ways that most people never will? See, there's a difference between a man who is alone and a man who walks alone. One is a victim of circumstance, isolated by rejection or inadequacy or fear. The other is something entirely different. He's what I call a chosen man, and his solitude isn't a punishment or a deficit. It's a consequence of having touched something real, something true, something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding because it demands too much of them. And once you've touched it, once you've tasted that particular kind of clarity, you can't go back to the comfortable illusions that make ordinary social life possible. You can't pretend anymore. You can't participate in the collective fictions. You can't reduce yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for someone who sees what you see. And so you walk alone, not because you're incapable of connection, not because you lack social skills or emotional intelligence, but because the price of belonging in most contexts is a betrayal of what you know to be true. This is what Adler understood about certain individuals. They're not defective. They're not antisocial. They're not suffering from some pathology that needs treatment. They've simply developed a level of consciousness that makes conventional social participation feel like a violence against their own soul. Let me tell you what this looks like in the lived experience of a chosen man, because I know this might sound abstract or philosophical, and it needs to be grounded in reality. He's in a conversation at work, and his colleagues are discussing something, let's say office politics or the latest controversy, or some social drama that everyone seems invested in. And he's listening, he's present, but there's a part of him that's watching from a distance, observing not just the content of the conversation but the patterns beneath it. He sees how people position themselves, how they signal allegiance, how they perform concern about things that don't actually matter while ignoring things that do. He sees the game being played, the social chess where everyone is maneuvering for status or validation or security. And he could play along. He's intelligent enough to participate. He knows what responses would earn approval, what opinions would make him likable, what performance would help him fit in. But something in him refuses. Not with arrogance, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet integrity that won't let him pretend to care about things he doesn't care about or perform interest in dramas that feel fundamentally empty. So he stays quiet, or he contributes something genuine that doesn't quite match the energy of the room, and people notice. They sense his distance. They feel his refusal to play the game, and they interpret it in the only way they know how. He's weird. He's cold. He thinks he's better than everyone else. He's not a team player. And none of these interpretations are true, but they're the stories people tell when they encounter someone who won't participate in the collective performance that holds their social world together. This is what Adler called living according to your own law, according to your own sense of truth rather than according to social expectations. And he understood that this kind of authenticity comes at a cost. The cost is belonging. The cost is easy connection. The cost is being understood by people who haven't done the work of understanding themselves. Because the chosen man, the man who walks alone, he's done that work. He's looked at himself without flinching. He's examined his motivations, his fears, his patterns, his ego structures. He's asked the difficult questions that most people avoid their entire lives. Who am I beneath the masks? What do I actually value versus what I've been taught to value? What am I willing to sacrifice for truth versus what am I willing to sacrifice for comfort? And in asking these questions, in following them to their uncomfortable conclusions, he's developed a kind of self-knowledge that makes pretense impossible. He can't unknow what he knows. He can't unsee what he's seen. He can't go back to the pleasant fog of unexamined life. And this clarity, this awareness, it creates a fundamental incompatibility with most social contexts. Not because he judges others, though people often think he does, but because he can't participate in the shared illusions that make those contexts function. He can't laugh at jokes that depend on cruelty. He can't engage in gossip that diminishes others. He can't perform enthusiasm for pursuits that feel empty. He can't reduce complex truths to comfortable platitudes. And so he stands apart, not by choice in the sense that he wants to be separate, but by choice in the sense that he chooses truth over belonging when the two are incompatible. And now I want to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest with me, because this answer is just for you. Have you ever felt like you're living in a world that's playing a game you can't participate in, not because you don't understand the rules, but because following those rules would require you to betray something essential in yourself? Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt utterly alone, not because no one was talking to you, but because the entire conversation felt like it was happening in a language you used to speak but can no longer force yourself to use? Let me tell you something that maybe no one has ever told you. That feeling, that sense of being fundamentally out of sync with the social world around you, it's not a defect. You haven't failed at being human. You've succeeded at becoming conscious. And consciousness, real consciousness, it's a lonely business because most people are still asleep, still operating on autopilot, still following scripts they've never examined. So I want to ask you something. If what I'm saying resonates deep within your being, if you recognize yourself as someone who walks alone not from inadequacy but from integrity, go down to the comments right now and simply write this. I walk my own path. Just those 4 words. I walk my own path. Because when you write that, when you claim that truth, you remind yourself that your solitude is not a failure but a choice. You create a marker for others who are walking this same lonely road and wondering if they're the only ones. Your comment can be that beacon for someone who is about to compromise their truth just to feel less alone. So write in the comments, I walk my own path. And if you want to share more, if you feel moved to describe what this journey has been like for you, this is your safe space. Here, we don't judge the man who walks alone. We understand him. Now let's go deeper into what Adler would say about why this happens, why certain men find themselves walking alone while others move easily through social worlds. Adler believed that every human being develops what he called a style of life, a consistent pattern of approaching the world that forms in early childhood and shapes everything that comes after. And for most people, this style of life is organized around fitting in, around finding security through belonging, around shaping themselves to meet external expectations. There's nothing wrong with this. It's a valid strategy for navigating human existence. But some individuals develop a different style of life, one organized around authenticity, around internal coherence, around the refusal to betray their own truth even when that truth isolates them. Adler would say this second type of person has developed what he called social interest at a higher level. Not social conformity, not social performance, but genuine interest in truth, in growth, in contributing something real rather than something comfortable. And here's the paradox that most people miss. The man who walks alone often has deeper social interest than the man who's constantly surrounded by people. He cares more about the collective good, about real contribution, about offering something authentic to the world. But he can't do it through the usual channels. He can't participate in the social games that most contribution seems to require. So he finds other ways. Through his work. Through his presence with the few people who can meet him at his level. Through his refusal to add to the noise and the performance and the falseness that already saturates social space. Think about what Adler meant by social interest, because it's commonly misunderstood. People think it means being social, being popular, being well-connected. But Adler meant something far deeper. He meant a fundamental orientation toward the welfare of humanity, a sense of being part of the larger human project, a willingness to contribute your gifts even when there's no immediate reward or recognition. And the chosen man, the man who walks alone, he has this. He's deeply interested in truth, in growth, in the evolution of consciousness. He's committed to not adding to the suffering and confusion and manipulation that already exists. He's willing to stand for something real even when standing for it means standing alone. This is social interest at its highest expression. Not the shallow sociability of fitting in, but the profound commitment to truth that sometimes requires you to stand apart. Adler saw this in the individuals who came to him, the ones who felt fundamentally different, fundamentally isolated. He didn't try to make them more social in the conventional sense. He helped them understand that their isolation was often a sign of integrity, a refusal to compromise core values for the comfort of belonging. And he helped them find ways to contribute, to connect, to express their social interest in forms that honored their authentic nature rather than forcing them into molds that never fit. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. I once knew a man who worked in a corporate environment, one of those places where success depends heavily on networking, on playing politics, on managing relationships strategically. And this man was brilliant at his actual work. He produced results that far exceeded his peers. But he was terrible at the social game. He didn't go to happy hours. He didn't engage in the casual conversations that build alliances. He didn't laugh at the boss's jokes or participate in the subtle competitions for status. He just did excellent work and went home. And you know what happened? He was passed over for promotions repeatedly. Not because he lacked competence. Everyone acknowledged his competence. But because he didn't fit. He wasn't one of them. He didn't play the game. And his managers, his colleagues, they interpreted his refusal to participate as arrogance, as lack of team spirit, as some kind of deficiency in his character. But here's what they didn't understand. This man had looked at the game and made a conscious choice not to play it. Not because he couldn't, he was socially intelligent enough to do it if he wanted to, but because it felt false to him. It felt like a betrayal of his own values to spend his evenings making small talk he didn't care about with people he didn't particularly like just to advance his career. So he accepted the consequences. He stayed at a lower level than his talents warranted. He earned less money than he could have. He endured the judgment of people who thought something was wrong with him. But he kept his integrity. He kept his soul. He kept the ability to look at himself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. Now some people would say this man was foolish, that he should have played the game, that the cost of his integrity was too high. But Adler would say something different. He would say this man was living courageously, making a choice that honored his deepest values even when that choice came with real costs. And the question isn't whether he should have played the game. The question is what kind of life he wanted to live. A life of external success built on internal compromise? Or a life of external modesty built on internal coherence? Neither answer is objectively right. But for this particular man, for his particular style of life, for his particular sense of what makes existence meaningful, the second option was the only one he could live with. And so he walked alone in that corporate environment. He had colleagues but not real friends there. He had professional relationships but not genuine connections. He was respected for his work but not truly seen for who he was. And he accepted this. Not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with clear-eyed recognition that this was the price of being himself in a context that rewarded performance over authenticity. This is what it means to be a chosen man. Not that you're better than others, not that you're special or superior, but that you've made a choice. A choice to honor your truth even when it costs you connection. A choice to walk alone rather than compromise the core of who you are. Let me tell you what happens inside a chosen man that others don't see, because the external appearance of walking alone doesn't capture the internal experience. People see him at a distance and think he must be cold, unfeeling, disconnected. But the truth is often the opposite. He feels deeply. He observes intensely. He cares profoundly about truth, about authenticity, about the human condition. But he's learned something that most people haven't learned. He's learned that most social connection is transactional. Most conversation is performance. Most relationships are based on mutual use rather than genuine recognition. And once you've seen this, once you've recognized the patterns beneath the surface, you can't participate in them with the same innocent enthusiasm that others bring. You can't pretend not to see what you see. You can't unknow what you know. So you're left in this position where you crave real connection, deep connection, authentic recognition, but you're surrounded by contexts that offer only shallow substitutes. And rather than accept the shallow substitutes, Rather than convince yourself that surface connection is enough, you choose to wait. You choose to be alone. You choose to preserve your capacity for depth by refusing to fill it with things that look like connection but aren't. This is not coldness. This is discernment. This is the refusal to betray your own hunger for something real by feeding it junk food just because junk food is readily available. Adler understood this deeply. He saw that some of his clients weren't lacking in their capacity for connection. They were excessive in their standards for it. They wanted too much, felt too deeply, saw too clearly to be satisfied with the ordinary forms of relationship that satisfied most people. And the conventional therapeutic approach would be to help them lower their standards, to teach them to accept what's available, to adjust their expectations to reality. But Adler took a different approach. He validated their hunger for authenticity. He affirmed that their refusal to compromise was not pathology but integrity. And then he helped them find contexts, create contexts, where genuine connection might be possible. Not by forcing them into conventional social situations that would never work for them, but by helping them understand their own nature clearly enough to seek out or create the rare circumstances where real meeting could occur. This might mean having 2 genuine friends instead of 20 casual ones. It might mean long periods of solitude punctuated by brief encounters of real depth. It might mean contributing to humanity through their work rather than through direct social engagement. But whatever form it took, it honored their authentic nature rather than trying to reshape them into something more conventionally social. Now here's where people often get confused, where they misunderstand what I'm saying. When I talk about the chosen man who walks alone, I'm not talking about the isolated individual who's cut off from all human connection. I'm not talking about the hermit who's rejected the world entirely. I'm not talking about the bitter misanthrope who's convinced that everyone else is stupid and he's the only one who sees clearly. That's not a chosen man. That's a wounded man. That's someone operating from what Adler called a superiority complex, using isolation as a defense against feelings of inadequacy. The chosen man is something different. He has the capacity for connection. He's proven it to himself. He has had, or currently has, relationships of real depth with people who see him clearly. He's capable of love, of intimacy, of genuine meeting when the conditions are right. But he's also capable of being alone without falling apart, without needing constant validation, without that desperate hunger for external confirmation that drives so much social behavior. He can hold himself. He can be with himself. He can find meaning and purpose and even joy in solitude because he's developed a rich internal world that doesn't require constant external stimulation to feel alive. And from this place of internal sufficiency, he can be selective. He can wait for real connection rather than grasping at shallow substitutes. He can walk alone without it meaning he's lonely. He can stand apart without it meaning he's disconnected. This is the distinction that most people miss. They see a man alone and assume he's alone because he failed at connection, because he's lacking some essential social skill or emotional capacity. But the chosen man is alone not from deficit but from abundance. He has enough internal richness that he doesn't need constant external validation. He has enough self-knowledge that he doesn't need others to tell him who he is. He has enough purpose that he doesn't need social belonging to feel his life has meaning. And this abundance, this sufficiency, it actually makes him more capable of real connection when it occurs. Because he's not desperate. He's not needy. He's not trying to use others to fill some void inside himself. He can meet people from wholeness rather than from lack. He can offer genuine presence rather than performing for approval. He can be truly interested in others rather than constantly monitoring whether they're interested in him. This is the paradox. The man who needs connection least is often the man most capable of genuine connection. And the man who needs it most is often the man least capable of it because his need makes everything transactional, everything conditional, everything oriented toward getting something rather than genuinely meeting. Adler would say this is what happens when you develop what he called the courage to be imperfect, which really means the courage to be yourself without apology. The chosen man has this courage. He's not trying to be perfect. He's not trying to be what others expect. He's not trying to fit himself into some ideal image of what a man should be. He's just being what he actually is, with all the messiness and contradiction and particularity that entails. And this authenticity, this refusal to perform, it repels some people and attracts others. The people it repels are those who need others to play predictable roles, who are threatened by authenticity because it challenges their own performance. The people it attracts are those who are starving for something real, who have been surrounded by performance for so long that genuine presence feels like water in a desert. And the chosen man, he's not trying to attract anyone. He's not trying to repel anyone. He's just being himself and letting the chips fall where they may. And the chips usually fall in the direction of solitude, at least in terms of quantity of connections. But the quality of the connections that do form, the depth of the relationships that survive his authenticity, those are worth more than 100 shallow friendships built on mutual performance. Let me tell you what the chosen man knows that others don't know, what he's learned through the hard experience of walking alone. He knows that most of what passes for connection is really just proximity. People being near each other, sharing space, exchanging words, but not actually touching at the level of soul. He knows that you can be surrounded by people and feel utterly alone, and you can be physically alone and feel deeply connected to all of humanity. He knows that the quality of your solitude determines the quality of your connections, that if you can't be happily alone, you'll never be genuinely together with others because you'll always be using them to escape yourself. He knows that the deepest form of respect you can show another person is to be fully yourself in their presence, not to perform or pretend or shape yourself to their expectations, but to offer the truth of who you are and trust that if they're meant to stay, they'll appreciate it, and if they're not, they'll leave, and that's okay too. He knows that loneliness is not about being alone. Loneliness is about being disconnected from yourself, about living in betrayal of your own truth, about performing a version of yourself that isn't real and then wondering why you feel empty inside. And he knows that the cure for loneliness is not more social connection. The cure for loneliness is coming home to yourself, living in alignment with your deepest values, having the courage to be who you actually are whether anyone is watching or not. This is wisdom that Adler would recognize and affirm. The understanding that your relationship with yourself is the foundation of all other relationships. That if you can't be honest with yourself, you can't be honest with anyone else. That if you abandon yourself to fit in, you bring an abandoned self to all your connections and wonder why they feel hollow. The chosen man has learned this. Maybe he learned it through painful experience, through years of trying to fit in and discovering that fitting in required too much self-betrayal. Maybe he learned it through insight, through reading or thinking or observing the patterns of human behavior. Maybe he learned it through necessity, through being so different that fitting in was never an option and he had to find another way. But however he learned it, he knows it now. He knows that walking alone with integrity is better than walking with others in compromise. He knows that standing for something real, even if you stand alone, is better than standing for nothing with a crowd. He knows that one conversation of genuine depth is worth more than a year of pleasant superficiality. And he organizes his life around these knowings, around these values, even when doing so costs him the easy belonging that others seem to have. And here's what I want you to understand if you're a man who walks alone, if you recognize yourself in what I'm describing. Your solitude is not a punishment. It's not evidence that you failed at something or that something is wrong with you. It's evidence that you've chosen truth over comfort, authenticity over belonging, integrity over approval. And yes, this choice comes with costs. It comes with loneliness sometimes. It comes with being misunderstood, with being judged, with being seen as strange or cold or arrogant by people who don't understand what you're doing or why you're doing it. But it also comes with gifts. It comes with self-respect, with the ability to look at yourself without shame, with the deep peace of living in alignment with your own truth. It comes with the capacity for real connection when it occurs, connection that's not based on performance or pretense but on genuine recognition. It comes with the freedom to pursue what matters to you without being derailed by social pressure or the need for constant validation. It comes with a quality of presence, of attention, of consciousness that's simply not available to people who are constantly performing for others. These gifts, they don't make up for the costs in some neat arithmetic. This isn't about justifying your solitude or convincing yourself it's worth it. This is about recognizing what's true. You walk alone because you can't walk any other way without betraying yourself. And that's not a choice in the sense that you sat down and weighed the options. It's a choice in the sense that your nature, your values, your level of consciousness, they leave you no real alternative. Adler would say you're living according to your own law, according to the requirements of your particular style of life, according to what your authentic self demands even when those demands conflict with social expectations. And he would affirm this. He would see it not as pathology but as courage, not as failure but as integrity, not as something to be fixed but as something to be understood and honored. Because here's what Adler understood that most people don't. Not everyone is meant to live the same way. Not everyone is meant to have the same kind of relationships, the same kind of social life, the same kind of connection to the collective. Some people are meant to be in the center of things, surrounded by people, drawing energy from constant interaction. And some people are meant to be on the edges, observing, thinking, creating, contributing in ways that require solitude and distance. Neither is better. Neither is worse. They're just different paths, different ways of being human, different expressions of the same fundamental commitment to living authentically and contributing genuinely. And the tragedy is when people who are meant for the edges try to force themselves into the center, or when people judge them for not fitting a pattern they were never meant to fit. The chosen man has stopped trying to force himself into the center. He's accepted his place on the edges, not with bitterness but with clarity. Not with resignation but with recognition that this is where he belongs. This is where he can be most fully himself. This is where his contribution is most authentic. Look, if you've made it this far, if you've stayed with me through this entire exploration, it's because you are this man or you're trying to understand him. And I want you to know something important. The world needs men who walk alone. Not because solitude is somehow superior to connection, but because the world needs people who won't compromise their truth for belonging, who won't sacrifice their integrity for approval, who won't participate in collective illusions just to feel included. The world needs people who can stand alone when standing alone is what truth requires. Who can say no when everyone else is saying yes. Who can see clearly when everyone else is caught in comfortable confusion. This is not about being special or superior. This is about fulfilling your particular function in the larger human project. Some people hold the center. Some people push the edges. Both are necessary. Both are valuable. And if you're a man who walks alone, you're pushing the edges. You're showing what's possible when someone refuses to compromise. You're demonstrating that there's another way to live, another way to be, another way to find meaning and purpose without following the conventional script. And even though you walk alone, even though few people understand what you're doing or why it matters, your example reaches further than you know. Someone sees you living according to your own law, and it gives them permission to question their own compromises. Someone notices your refusal to perform, and it helps them recognize their own performance. Someone feels your authenticity, and it awakens their hunger for their own. This channel exists for men exactly like you. For those who walk alone not from weakness but from strength, not from fear but from integrity, not from inability to connect but from refusal to connect falsely. Here we explore what it means to live authentically in a world that constantly pressures you to perform, to conform, to reduce yourself to something more convenient for others. Every week I create content for men who are navigating this lonely path, who need to be reminded that their solitude is not failure but choice, that their distance is not coldness but discernment, that their refusal to fit in is not defect but integrity. So if this resonates with you, if you feel understood for the first time in a long time, subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but for you. Because you deserve to have a space that affirms your path, that validates your choices, that reminds you that you're not alone in walking alone. Like this video if it helped you see your solitude as strength rather than weakness. Because every like helps me reach more men who need this message, who are questioning their path, who are wondering if they should compromise their truth just to feel less alone. And hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next reflection, because we're going to continue exploring what it means to build a life of genuine integrity in a world of comfortable compromise. I'll see you in the next video. And in the meantime, walk your path with pride. You were chosen for this solitude not as punishment but as calling. Honor it. Live it. And trust that the right people will recognize what you're doing and why it matters.